Welcome to Separate Together, a podcast exploring what happens when we change not just how families separate, but how we think about legal separations altogether. Hosted by me, practicing family lawyer Melissa Bourgeois.
And by me, definitely not a lawyer, Cody Deb.
And just a quick disclaimer, we like to remind our listeners that this podcast should not be taken as legal advice and it is for informational purposes only. Because everyone's relationship is different, please consult a legal professional if you have any questions.
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. We just finished up Easter weekend, so I'm dragging still a lot of time with my children.
Does it have anything to do with the massive amount of snow that we still have here in Canada on April 8th, which is, still snowing this morning, still had to uncover our cars. I think that might have a little bit to do with the fatigue. Not seeing any green. The despair,
the absolute hopelessness. It does have a lot to do with that.
And it's impacted so much that we just have to raise that Cody and I did not purposely try to color coordinate ourselves to the Edmonton Oilers. We just want to put that out there. We just woke up like this. So this is what happens when we haven't seen sunshine in 6 months and it's still snowing. We turn into unconscious fangirls.
It's bad if even I'm wearing a color. Like, that's how badly I need spring.
I know. So anyway, Cody, I think we need to start this one off with a little bit of a pat on our shoulders, a little humble brag at this point. Last week, we were talking about Chase and Miranda, whom we love and who we think are, these incredible people who are using their light really to shine really brightly on how it's possible to be amazing co-parents. And I think we had a little bit of an excited moment where Chase actually commented that he'd listened to our podcast. And so we just wanted to, acknowledge that. That's really huge for us. I think there's so many of us out here that are watching the legal lives of Mormon wives unfold, and we're trying to figure out how we're supporting each of them. And Chase and Miranda were A1, keep doing what you're doing. So yeah, it was really fun. It was fun for us to get. So, just thanks guys for listening and for what we're doing. And then, for keeping on doing the amazing job that you're doing.
I mean, I hope you sent it to Miranda because I'm a real Miranda
I know you are.
Yeah, day one, Miranda.
Yeah, I think you would. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but we just wanted to start that one off by just, hey, listen, there's real people out there having really great co-parenting stories, and these very public people are being very genuine about it.
Yeah, I mean, we are unfortunately seeing the most incredibly stark contrast of that. I know we don't want to delve too deeply into the legal lives of Mormon wives. We're kind of done with that. But I've been watching a little bit online about the trial, I guess. Is that what you would call it now? Between Taylor and Dakota. And they've got, clearly the legal system is engaged. And it's like a real collision between my worlds. I think it's really funny. So many of the comments are, I simply cannot believe that this is being made public. And then all of the lawyers weigh in and are like, family court is always public. And it's so interesting because it's something you have said time and time again is if you cannot control yourselves or you cede control to the legal system will take control, and it will be this horrifying public humiliating spectacle. And I know that's not the intention of the legal system. It's just simply a byproduct, and I think people are shocked by that. And that's something you always caution our clients or any clients or prospective clients or just people in general about is if you cede that ownership, if you simply cannot work together, the other side of this is this really, really horrific scenario that we're seeing play out. And I think everybody's suddenly learning what an ad litem is and how that functions. And it's really awful for everyone involved, absolutely awful, and not something, we overly want to discuss. But I do think the thing that is interesting is people are really getting to see the legal system do what it is supposed to do, which is protect people who are vulnerable, particularly the children in this case. And it is doing that. And I can't imagine the task for that judge to have to know that it's going to be so public, to have to be so careful. But that is what the legal system is designed to do, is really take that objective protectionist role. And we're kind of seeing that play out. And it's nice, especially in the age of online, to kind of be able to say hey, these institutions exist. They do very important work, and this is it in action. And as awful as this is, people are finally at least getting to see that lawyers are real people and judges are real people, and they're here to protect you. And hopefully that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah, well, I mean, protecting the child. And I think, like that is, whether this is a public or not public thing, this judges are very cognizant of the role that they are being called to have when people are unable to do so. And there was always this refrain called the best interest of the children. That was the test, the fundamental test of like, is this parenting plan in the best interest of the children? Is this time with this parent in the best interest of the children? And over time, it became trite. Like, no matter who we were always quoting, but like that's actually their literal job in the absence of parents who are unable to focus on what actually is best for their children. And that's what this judge was very cautious about. Right now, they're in an interim period of time where I think he's kind of, there's some supervised parenting and then more evidence will come forward. But the judge's role was not about Dakota. It was not about Taylor. Those were not the people that he's focused on. He is focused on, in this case, this particular child. I acknowledge there are other children also involved in this saga. However, this was this judge's role, is to make sure that this child is protected in the absence of parents who are not quite yet in the space where they can focus on that. And that's just, again, we've got these two spectrums where we have that couple on one end who have engaged with the legal process involuntarily. Like, I don't think either one of them's like, I'm going to call a judge, but like that's where they are because they are so unable to regulate themselves, regulate their relationship, focus on parenting. And then you have Chase and Miranda on the other side, whom, again, I'm speculating, I don't know, but have not engaged with the legal system in any formal way. They just sorted out their parenting between themselves. I'm assuming there's some kind of financial plan for the children. And then they've done their emotional work with probably therapists, family, whoever, to be like, yeah, there's certain things when we're reframing our interpersonal relationship, but we can do this. And unfortunately, the other couple is unable to do this at this point in time. Perhaps there will be some therapeutic interventions. We'll see where this judge goes at the whole parenting scheme, because this is for life, right? This child's only 2. So this is going to be like, hopefully not much more of a wild, bumpy road for this child into its future. But certainly the law will continue to have a lot to say, and the law has the authority to decide in the absence of the parents being able to do so themselves. So yeah, really, really interesting compare and contrast of these two different ways of doing it. And again, just circumstance, but at this point it's like, yeah, like now the whole world is watching this stage. And, I think we've been joking about taking you down to the courthouse for a birthday party, just so that you can actually see what I've been talking about all of these years, how actual fraught it is. And, these judges are doing the best that they can, but the complexities of the things that people are bringing towards them. And that's what this judge in particular in Utah was like, I don't actually know the truth right now, but I know the evidence that you've brought to me. And I know that my task right now is only to make sure that this child is as protected as they can be. So really weighted, really heavy, real stark reality checking. I think that people are like, that can happen to someone, quote, famous.
Yeah, that can happen to anyone.
Yeah, and it is, right? Or you've got these other quiet ones that you're like, oh yeah, and then there's like a whole bunch of other people who are separating all the time and sorting it out, being quiet about it, and it didn't even have a ripple. Like, we're like, okay, all right, off we go, right?
Yeah, but it does, I think, you raised a really important point. Again, we're speculating, but you don't think at this point that they've engaged the formal legal system. That's something that happens really often, especially kind of in our scenario, because turnaround time for a separation agreement, like kind of the meat of the separations here, is really quick. We talk about this often. It's between 4 and 6 weeks. But then in Canada, like you need to wait a year to file for your legal divorce, your divorce documents. And oftentimes, depending on when we get our clients, like I'll see our clients kind of go through a lot of the work to get the separation agreement, and then they kind of leave it. And sometimes they really leave it. And sometimes I'm like, hey, do you want to kind of close the loop? I'm a real loop closer. I love to close a loop, but I am curious on your thoughts, especially kind of given your past, like your traditional litigation background, like why do people wait so long to close that loop, to get legally divorced? It seems like there are so many vulnerabilities in having the plan, maybe executing the plan, making those kind of initial decisions, but not formalizing the actual legal separation.
Yeah. That's a loaded, layered question. I think,
We're doing a podcast.
Right? Yeah, that's the thing. And that's where we kind of wanted to lead off because, again, like Chase and Miranda, we left them with this big question mark. Like, why didn't they get to it? And, as we move back into normal content, Cody and Melissa, this is very much it. Why do some people delay divorce? A lot of people delay separation, right? So they'll stay in something that they're like, I don't know what the future holds. That's really uncertain. So I'm going to stay here. But you're, I think, referring to like, we've decided the separation is happening. Maybe we're still in the same home. Maybe there's a whole bunch of things, but we're just not moving forward with the formal stuff. And I would say first and foremost, it's probably fear. The legal process, as we've just alluded to, you have in your mind's eye this big courtroom with this ominous thing where there, I can speak personally, there was never pleasure that was had in that building. Nobody's like, yay, I'm so excited to be in this brutal beast of a building, airing my grievances and fighting for my life, right? So I think there's just the fear of engaging with the process. Certainly our clients in particular, and this was my argument with the Law Society, are fearful of engaging with the legal process because they're getting along, and the legal process presumes the opposite. They presume you are opposing each other. They presume the old guard of divorce where one has more power, there's a power imbalance, or they presume that there was a huge catalytic thing which led to perhaps the questions about safety for one of the spouses, like those more traditional, like this marriage blew up because a big event happened. And our clients, myself included, are having quiet divorces where it's just like, crap, like, our relationship is changing, and we didn't know we were in a legal relationship before, because this is the misnomer that I try to remind people is you can go and pay $50 to registries, get yourself a marriage license, get married as long as you're 18 years or over, and nobody's giving you life advice. Nobody's telling you the consequences of joining yourselves onto a mortgage together. Nobody is saying like once you have children together, you're interdependent for life. Like there isn't any of that life coaching. And then all of a sudden you want to quote get divorced, which in my case and many cases, it's pretty straightforward. Like it's just like, I'll take my bank account, you take your bank account, we're on this lease, one of us will stay, we'll leave, we have no kids. But we had to do all of this paperwork, and we had to prove to some unknown person that we were doing this in conformity with the law. So I think there's kind of that, I'll start with the emotional side, which is just like the fear of either disrupting something that is decently working because you don't want to bring an adversarial process into your home. Like you're like, no, this isn't my enemy. And every lawyer that I've called has like, even in my own case, the lawyer who did my prenup was like, I'll write him a letter, put him in his place. And I was like, I don't think he needs to be put in his place. Like, I think that would actually complicate things for us. So me, myself, as my own professional, that was a major thing. So I think fear of engaging with the legal process or the legal process itself, right? Because it's so complicated. I think ChatGPT and AI and all these other things is starting to distill that down for people where you can ask it questions at least like, what should I be wearing in court? Or like, what's an affidavit? Or how do I understand this process? But I would say it starts there, and then that spectrum kind of morphs. In my litigation career, I had people who could not get divorced for 5 or 6 years because you have to have all of the issues resolved before you can apply. And so a judge is not going to let you get divorced if you're still fighting about parenting or if spousal support isn't decided. So that's oftentimes like a delay in a divorce can just be because you're in the legal process itself. So maybe you're in collaborative and you're still on your 6th or 7 meetings, but you're just like still working through the terms. I think is, and then ultimately like people just don't want involvement in their personal lives. Like at the end of the day, if you're like, I'm a good parent, who are you to tell me I'm not, right? And as soon as another lawyer gets involved, they're going to start to diminish my character because that's the job. And I don't want you to diminish my character because I don't plan on diminishing yours, right? So I think first and foremost, the delay for divorce, I would say emotional, right? And then of course, financial.
Yeah. I think you've done a really good job of illustrating why it happens in kind of the traditional system. You have terms that you need to agree on, and that can take quite a long time, especially if you have 2 lawyers involved. I understand it quite differently in our process. I think because they've engaged one lawyer, so they're already in that amicable mindset and they're working as a team. Oftentimes it's like they're triaging the response, like they've got decisions to make, they're working together, they're working as a team. I mean, divorce is an awful process regardless, but there's a lot of power and comfort in that, in knowing like, okay, okay, you're still my teammate. You're going to help me get out of this house and into the next one. You're going to come help me set up the beds. I'm not going to be packing up the kitchen alone. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to get the kids settled. We're going to work together. And you always do such a beautiful job of explaining, like, there's going to be an integration period. Let's make a plan for that. And then we can come back together and kind of identify some holes or things that need tightening up, what's not working, make some modifications. And so there's a really comfortable bubble that our clients get to kind of live in that year or 9 months, where it's like, we're trying this out, we're working together, we're still a team, we're still a family, we're going to do this together. And I think what I see happening is when it is working, there's a lot of fear, exactly like you said, of suddenly rocking the boat, or it's that kind of fear of finality. Like, we just...
That's another emotion.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to do this thing and it's going to become final, and everything feels really good right now, and I don't know if I want to do that.
Well, and it's the attachment between you, right? Like, and I think the old way of looking at things was like, as soon as a decision to divorce was made, that ended the relationship, and you need to restart from that basis. So now I'm on my own. You're not a part of my life. I've got to rebuild my life as though. And now that we are so much more emotionally mature and capable of kind of understanding, like, that's a stark reality. And I mean, if you have kids, you can't, like, it's an impossible equation. But to your point of that finality, like, it's like, well, if I sign these papers and it's over, do we still have a relationship? Like, are we now, is this, you're going to distance yourself from me? And ultimately that is the outcome of a legal separation, is over time you will draw more and more separation from one another. But I think more and more in that reframe of a relationship where you're just like, yeah, but we're still mom and dad, right? And like, our clients in particular, you know, some of my advice is like, set some time aside, just you and your co-parent, maybe once a month, or if that's too much, once every 2 months, where you have just dedicated co-parent time together to discuss your children. And like, the feedback on that has been almost relief too, where you're just like, I can explain this to everybody else that comes up in my life, even if my mom's not a huge fan of you right now, but like, this is a relationship that I'm still going to continue to have. These are the boundaries we're going to have, and this is going to be the reframe. And I think that takes out some of that fear of like, as soon as I sign this legal document, though, I don't have a reason that you need to be, quote, with me. And it's like, actually, how about I'm still just like your life ally? Like, I'm just another person in your life, right? So I think like that side of it, absolutely. Even my own self, like, it felt very final, and it was devastating. Like, we both cried when we signed our documents, and thank God we were able to hug each other after that and share that experience, be like, this really sucks, right? And you're like, yeah, it really does. But then after that, like, you know, then another 6 months goes, and then another 2 years goes, and then you individuate. That's what I say over time. Like, you're going to individuate, and that's normal, but it doesn't have to be right now, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow. It can be over time, right? So I think like that side of it is a lot of the difficulty of like people, you know, or facing it. Like, it's very scary is the other thing. I was just speaking to people this morning, and it's like, we don't understand how this is going to work. And it's like, yeah, because like now you're faced with 100% of your income going into 50% pocket budgets to homes. So there's a lot of fear as it relates to that. So then you're just like, okay, so I got to take my time and figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think if we look at our clients who had similar separations to yours, where there weren't children involved and it really was they are going their separate ways, I'm curious, you mentioned expense, and when you look at the grand scheme of separation, the expense for the formal divorce part is not nominal, but like the litigation where you're like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in. You know, we do divorce documents here for around $2,500. So it's not a massive price, but I almost feel like that in some ways makes people be like, you know, I'll leave it. And I'm just curious, for our clients who have moved out, like maybe the separation is 5 years old, they've either sold the house, taken their equity, gone their separate ways, there was never a spousal component, or income sharing at all, and they kind of dealt with the pets and dealt with the items in the home. Like, what are the implications of remaining legally married, or the vulnerabilities there?
So there's a few. I mean, first and foremost, I'm always like, you can't get married to someone else if you're still married. We frown upon polygamy. That's a good point. In Canada. Like, it's just not something we'll let you do. So, you know, we do get panicked phone calls that it's like, you know, we're going to Mexico. I need this marriage certificate, and nobody told me that I can't unless I have my divorce certificate. Can you perform a miracle? And I'm like, well, no. Like, actually, there's a process. You know, so there's that part. I think you mentioned price, and I mean, I see this every day because I have the, the role that I hold. I have access to people's financial portfolios, and even $2,500 for a service that you don't think you have much use for, right? Like, I mean, that's not something that everybody, putting a $2,500 down payment on a car gets you a car, right? But $2,500 on legal fees gets you what? Like, I never wanted to pay these in the first point. And then there's the unknown. And it's just like, when I look at this, like the average collaborative process costs like about 30 grand start to finish. And when I look at these portfolios, that's a huge substantive chunk out of an investment portfolio, out of the equity that you carefully built in your home over time in the work. And so the utility of, especially for those people who are like, but we're self-regulating, we don't actually need a ton of hand holding through this. And then like, why are we now submitted to having to go through all of these paperwork documents, prove that this car was actually worth this much, have an expert come and prove that that car was worth that much, when really you're like, can we just agree that the car was worth this? And you're like, yeah, cool, yeah. Because so more and more I think is the changing dynamic of families and the members within them, where they're just like, why? It used to be that law was a lot rights based, right? And that's like, we had to fight for rights, we had to get them, with the understanding that the other one was holding you back from having that right, so you had to fight for it. It's no longer like that. Like, it's just like, we don't need to rectify wrongs. We don't need to rebalance things. It's just so that utility of being like, well, are we going to really sink in? Like, I just talked to a lawyer. They want 10 grand from me and they want 10 grand from you. So we're $20,000 in right now. Or we just kind of take some risks, because I think I'll get back to you asked about the risks, but like, there is that financial entanglement part that over time becomes much more complicated to untangle. Where are you valuing the joint asset? What's the timing of it? Because here in our province, the date of valuation of property can be the date of trial, and understanding that only 2% probably of families ever end up in a family property trial. Like, that isn't usually the test, but that can be my interpretation as lawyer A, that I'm like, well, it behooves my client that we value things, because now 5 years later your portfolio is $100,000 more. My client wasn't that great with money and went on a bunch of trips and figured themselves out in the spiritual realm, and now you're still tethered, and we want a piece of that. And it doesn't mean necessarily automatically it would, but it could be that you're just like, well, we're still joined. And that's where I always say to our clients, like, a lot of them ghost us for the formal paperwork with the courts. They have their separation agreement, which is their contract between themselves, they've built the frameworks, they're using that, they're governing themselves. That takes the risk out significantly, because you can rely upon a contract and say, and particularly in our case, we've had impartial legal advice, we've had full disclosure, we've had a legal opinion, we've had the opportunity to discuss this together. These are the terms. So it would be hard to kind of go back later and be like, well, 5 years later though, like, we never got the divorce, like whatever. And then some of them, I think, ghost us to do the formal divorce docs, because like, in my own experience, it's a big one. You're like, the terms are settled, kids are integrating into our own homes, we're still doing our healing. Interpersonally, I'm still working through with my therapist, and I'm just not ready to get that document back from a judge, because I'm just not ready. And in our case, having the separation agreement, I never worry about it. Like, when you're just like, I just followed up with so and so and they're crickets, like, and one will come back when they get engaged. and they need it, but their terms are protected and safe, right? But I think oftentimes clients don't have the opportunity to get that, because they're in longer legal processes, that they're like, well, 3 years in and now I'm at $50,000, like, I still, and I've signed nothing. So like, that's where all of those parts fuse together. So even if I used to call it whack-a-mole, like, we totally settled child support, and you're like, well, yeah, but 3 years later we didn't settle spousal, so it's all put together, so now we got to do it again, right? So I think that's where people are like, no, like, one-stop shop. That's what One Family Law does. Make sure that we've got all of this, we've got our life advice, we're moving forward, and then just making sure it's papered properly, so that if somebody did need to read into those mutual intentions, it was done from a place of equality, it was done from a place of information, and it was done from a place of, I bought this house myself, no mortgage broker gave me legal advice to put my name on $1 million thing, so I'm good. I don't need that much hand holding.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. It's always underestimate how emotional and overwhelming it is for people to sign those documents. I've just simply never done it myself. I'm always surprised by it, and you never are, because you have done it and you get it, and you're in the room with them when they sign, and it's a really emotional thing. But I think, to your point, it's so important to begin a process, perhaps not a legal process. If you work with a mediator, if you're working, I think, to your point, again, is it does have to kind of be at least a contract between yourselves, at least a mediated agreement, something that you can refer back to, because people really are shocked at how quickly their lives can change. Since partners, exactly like you said, job losses, so much can happen so quickly. And again, like, I grew up with a father who was a life insurance salesman. So like, this was the messaging I received all the time. But yeah, like it's really, we talked about this in a previous episode too. It's shocking to me how we can see clients for this really acute period of time, and then they come back and I'm like, you are completely different people. Like, you've changed careers, you've been re-educated, you have new partners, you have another child. Like, it's wild. And so at least having something to refer back to, which is, we made these decisions at these times in good conscience, with disclosure and with legal advice, is so unbelievably important, just because of the fact that things can change so quickly.
Well, and what I often hear so often when I'm doing our initial consultations, or even within the process, is most people are like, I have a general idea of like what's fair and reasonable, but I just want to make sure that I'm protected. I want to make sure that my partner is protected, those types of things. And by not having a formalized agreement, and that was my argument with the Law Society, like, it shouldn't take, especially the amicable couples, years and years to come to a formal agreement. Are they held and bound by that? They can change the terms anytime they want if they agree to, but they've had these decisions, which then allows them to be in a really unusual position to move on and move forward, right? But when you're stuck in a legal process, and that would be the thing, is like, as much as you're like, I'm done with this person, and I'm blah blah blah, and I have my new person, and they're the best, and la la la, like, you can't actually move forward in such a clear way when there's still this legal thing that's hanging on to you, right? Where you're just like, well, I think I'm going to get this much in equity from the house, but I don't know, because maybe I'm going to spend another $50,000 of it on legal fees, or maybe a judge is going to decide that I don't get the spousal support that my lawyer has told me all of this time that I'm entitled to, and this is what we're fighting for. So that isn't clear. And I think what our clients are incredible at is taking their practical reality at what it is, and not trying to change it or make it the other person's fault that it is going to become challenging for a period of time. They acknowledge that legal separations means two budgets. They acknowledge that their savings are probably not going to grow in the same way, but they know that, and then they're willing to just be like, this is the best that we can do. Because like I said, most portfolios are not complicated. People have been governing their families without any interference just fine. And this was where I was like, it's not because they're getting legally divorced or separated that they become dumb at life. We just presumed that they have, but they very much are like, I think spousal should be this, I think child support should be that. Like, the amount of times I'm amazed by the design of their own things, and sometimes I tweak and adjust it. Sometimes I'm like, actually, you didn't quite understand the law and its points here. And then once they do, they reframe. They're like, okay. But for the most part, because they're like, well, we've had budgets together our whole lives. We know what our kids are going to cost. We know how much we make. So then there isn't a victim or a victimizer in this equation. It's just like practical realities. And I think that's what the more modern families that we're kind of assisting here are just like, we were going to bypass the whole legal thing because, like, quite frankly, you guys are, you're out to lunch with your expectations of what we need to be proving in order to continue to relate. This is more so like they're coming to me for confirmation and also for depth of knowledge. And I think that is, we talk about AI around here, who doesn't, right? But it's just like, that's where the gaps come in. Every time I'm like, well, yeah, like, this thing has given you some principles, but me as a practicing lawyer, I'm going to give you a little bit more depth. And they're like, okay, cool. And then they go on. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really like the real magic of this process. We always refer to it as like a timely and proportional legal response. And that can be a bit and like word salady. Yeah, exactly. It's like kind of, like, what does that really mean?
Flat fees.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Unheard of. But I think where it really happens is, like, especially when I'm speaking to someone for the first time, is it's exactly like you said, like, they have a really good understanding of proportionally what they need. And it does vary. It's a spectrum, of course, but like for the vast majority, it's exactly like you said, we've been running our lives. We have a really good understanding. We have an innate sense of what's fair, and we simply need someone to ensure that it complies with the laws of separation. And they're willing to pay for that because they know it's not going to be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. It's going to be this flat fee, and they're going to receive advice, legal advice proportional to where they are. The thing too that I find really commendable is they will acknowledge sometime like we're really struggling with the spousal component. We're going to need a bit more support, or the shift work makes the parenting plan really, really challenging. This integration period is really long, or I'm in residency, or I'm, re-educating. Like we're going to need a lot more help with our parenting plan. But it's amazing how they come in knowing that they've already identified what's going to be a sticking point, where they're going to need support, but they're very clear about that. Like very rarely do we get clients who come in who are like, it's just going to be a battle. It's going to be a fight. And you're like, what is going to be a fight? What exactly? You know what I mean? Like,
and if that's your mindset, like that's okay, then there are other processes that suit that kind of mindset much more. And that's the piece. But over and over and over again, what I've been kind of, now we've been hundreds of couples that we've assisted at this point. So we're not just talking based on like a small subset of data here. It is what I had been like arguing, with my tiny microphone. But we got to meet the couples where they're at. And to your point, it doesn't have to be complex. Oftentimes people are like, that's it. Oh, and like I'll sit and I'll kind of laugh and I'm like, well, we could raise drama if we really wanted to. But when we take a practical look at your finances, you understand the law, you understand how you're going to reframe this. It doesn't have to be this big kind of turmoil of like who was right and who was wrong. Like they've already done that work, and there isn't attribution of blame necessarily, right? Maybe one did have an affair and that was the reason the relationship came to an end, but there's that ownership on both sides that doesn't need to be rectified through a mystical legal process that seemingly promises you that it's going to right any wrong that you've ever experienced in life. And like that's too big of a promise even for an omnipotent God, right? So, but at the end of the day, I think there's just a vast spectrum of people who are approaching legal separations and divorce. And I find that, what our clients are really good at is embracing that change and not fighting it. And, that's the beautiful thing to witness is, like you're doing it. And I'm so genuinely proud of them. Like a lot of the times I feel like I'm just like this cheerleader where I'm like, way to be amazing, and they kind of look at me like, and I'm like, no, but like comparatively, right?
You're like, I've seen some shit.
Like I've been into the bowels, right? And so like now I'm just, kind of floating around with these wonderful people. And like I said, like sometimes we're in moments where we're kind of laughing and giggling because life is absurd and you have to laugh at it. And then like one of them will get caught off guard and tears will come and then they're overwhelmed. And I'm like, yeah. And that's totally normal and fine. But what a better thing to have your co-parent or your partner supporting you through that and be like, yeah, she just needs a minute, or like he's just going to need to go for a walk for a sec and then come back, as opposed to this is my opponent. I cannot show any emotion. I don't care that it hurts me actually to see you hurt. I've got to just be this like warrior now. And it's like, that's a lot harder. So then, Yeah,
I agree. I mean, I think we make it achievable for people to complete and to get things finished. And I think that's something that I don't see in the traditional system is there's just a barrier by nature of the system. There's always a barrier to finishing, to completing, to moving on. And that's not helpful for anyone from a financial perspective, a mental health perspective. I do find it really funny sometimes. Funny is maybe not the right word, but it's interesting when we will get clients who are like, okay, we're ready to finish things. And I'm like, great. It's like, can I have, your spouses, because they're still your spouses, contact details? And they're like, oh, I have no idea. I haven't seen them in 20 years. And I'm like, oh, okay. How am I going to, like, I got to put my detective hat on and be like, how do I source this person for you so you can untether your very legal marriage?
Yeah. But again, time came and passed and neither one of us had a bone to pick with the other one, and we didn't really want to. It's like it can go on because beyond updating your vital statistics with the CRA every year where you're like separated, like nobody's calling you. And like that's the other part. We do such profound work here, and then I always say the point for me is always that as lovely as they are, I know that I'm unlikely to ever see them in my office again because we have set their foundation and they're capable of taking it and building from that runway themselves, and they're doing an incredible job. But I always remind them that every year, particularly those with children, are going to be doing an annual child support review. And then the consternation of like, well, then do we have to call the judge? And I'm like, nope. like legal stuff's over for you guys. You're divorced and you can just be humans.
Yeah, you can just go forth and prosper.
Okay, well,
all right.
Thanks as always, Cody.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Separate Together.
If you like what you hear or think someone else might, please rate and review us and tell your friends to tune in. You can find us at onefamily.law.